Hello everyone, in today's video, I'll show you how to create this adorable bear looking at a beautiful butterfly in Procreate. We'll paint together and I'll guide you by sharing my favorite techniques to bring this beautiful moment to life. Whether you're just starting out from your artistic journey or an advanced skilled artist, these tips will help you take your work to the next level. Take a moment to cozy up, grab your blanket, and let's get started. All the brushes and the canvases I'm using will be found in the description below. You can download the free sketch and color palettes there as well. For today's demonstration, I'll be using the mid-texture canvas, but you can use any canvas you like. And as you can see, I have already imported the sketch here underneath the watercolor texture canvas effect, and we're going to create a new layer underneath that sketch. And the color palettes will be in order for you to follow along. And we'll start with the wet on dry brush from our realistic watercolor brush set. Keeping the opacity and the size at 100%, and we'll start from the left of the darker shades since the light is coming from the right side. So we'll work in 3 layer tones, dark, mid, and light tones. So we'll start with the left back side of this little bear. And we're going to color in the ears in the back. And we'll put a little bit of that dark tone color underneath the arms. Now we're going to create a new layer and pick the second tone color that's going to be a mid-tone color of a slight light brown, working away from the top, adding layers like this. Since the shoulder is going to be a little bit covered, it's going to be a little bit darker. And the last light tone we're putting on is going to be the light tone color of the lightest brown. We're going to create a new layer and pick this light tone color, and starting from the top and filling the rest of the bear like this. If you do enjoy watching these tutorials, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, you'll be notified when new videos are released. Now we're going to blend the 3 tone colors. So we're going to use our 2 fingers and pinch them together like this and combine them. It will be a lot smoother and easier for us to blend with the combined layered tones like this. Now we're going to use the moving blender and keeping the size to around 40% and 100% opacity. And starting from the top, we're just going to wiggle around, mixing 2 tone colors like this. All we're doing is combining these tone colors, creating the base tone color for us to add on later on. Now it's time to add some of the facial features of this bear. Now we're going to create a new layer. So we're going to pick this black tone color and we're going to use the fine line brush and keep the opacity to around 55% and around 33% for the size. And focusing on the nose and all the way down to the mouth. Rather than having straight lines, I'm going to break the lines just like this, with a little bit of more pigment near the edges of the mouth. Now zoom in and we're going to focus on the eye. And just looping around and leaving a small area at the top of the light reflection just like this. And we can increase the opacity to around 80% and adding a little bit of more darker tone around the nose and the eyes. This will give a slight depth of tone colors rather than being pitch black. And now we're going to add some fur details by picking this dark brown tone color and continue using the fine line brush, keeping the opacity to around 50%, and we're going to work on the edges just like this. Putting slight flares on the edges and on the inside. As you can see, I have put some sketch marks for you guys to follow along and just tapering off at the end. And we're going to do this all across the bear. Just adding small details like this will really enhance the painting to give that nice fuzzy look of the little bear without doing too much. And that's my main goal with these paintings. I try to find ways to keep it simple, easy, and fun to do. As much as I want to sit down and do a painting for an hour or two, majority of the times, I just want to pick up my iPad and finish a painting within 10 to 20 minutes. And I encourage anyone who is trying to get better at their craft, either be traditional, digital, art, or any other forms of art, to practice every day. Just do something towards your craft. Not only does it keep you from losing your momentum of creating art, but some of your best pieces might come from nowhere. We're going to go all the way across the back of the bear like this. And we're going to add some more details to the ears using the fine line brush. Going around, filling in the areas of the back and inside the ear, just like this. Nothing too crazy, simple, creating a little bit more depth in the ears. And we're going to keep the opacity to around 30%. And like I said, working with the sketches that are inside the body. Just put 2 to 3 lines, tapering it off at the end, giving a nice fur look. And this is what you should have so far. Now we're going to add that watercolor stain look and creating more depth. So we're going to create a new layer underneath this layer that we just made for the general part of the bear. And we're going to use the rough hard edge brush, keeping the opacity to around 50%. Continue using that dark tone that we used for the edges of the fur. And focusing on the back of the ears, which is going to be a little bit darker and creating more depth. And the back side of the bear. And it doesn't need to be perfect. We want to create natural watercolor stain looks that are going to be uncontrolled, a little bit wild, and letting the brush do its work. And we'll put a little bit of that dark tone color underneath the arms. And now we're going to put another second tone color on top of that. Now we're going to create a new layer and use a lighter tone color, keeping the opacity to around 40%. And we're going to put another layer around the neck area. The key to this is adding layers to create depth and natural watercolor stain looks. And we're going to reduce the size to around 35% and focusing on the face of the bear, putting some edges to the corner of the nose and inside the eyes like this. We're not going for an ultra realistic painting at this time, but I want to give a little bit more realism of the face. By adding more depth like this underneath the chin, we'll create some more realism to this painting. Going to be a little bit more darker in the corner of the back of the shoulder and the arms like this. And we can increase the size to 100% for the larger parts of the area. So we're going to add them like that. To give a bit more natural look of the watercolor stain looks, we're going to use the blending tool, and we're selecting that layer that we just made for the watercolor stain looks, and we're using the feathering brush. And all we're doing is tapping it, but a little bit of a drag, mixing in some of the colors, sometimes pulling in and then dragging it out, so the edges don't have such a harsh look. And now we're going to select that previous tone color for the darker tones of the watercolor stain looks, and we're doing the same thing. Slight tap and just dragging it in or out there. This will leave some of the watercolor stain looks, but also giving that natural mixture of the tone colors. Now we're going to create a new layer and add the darkest tone colors. We're going to pick this darkest tone color of the brown, and we're going to use the wet on dry brush and keeping the opacity to around 45%. 100% size, And we're going to focus on the areas that are going to be more darker area tones, just like the back of the ears and the back and some parts of the shoulders. The wet on dry brush is perfect for this because it has watercolor stain look hard edges, but also it's very controlled and much more predictable. And this is what we want in this stage. And adding a little bit more of those dark tone colors underneath the arms. And now we're going to be working on the butterfly. So create a new layer and pick this light orange tone color using the fine line brush and keeping the opacity at 100% and size to around 20. And we're going to zoom in and paint in the colors on the inside of the butterfly like this, leaving the edges and some parts of the top corners open for more coloring later on. Now the bottom piece, we're going to fill them up with the same tone colors. I decided to use this tone color because it complements the bear colors, working with the light brown tone colors. And now we're going to create a new layer. We're going to tap on that layer and we're going to use the clipping mask. And now we're going to pick a yellow tone color, keeping the size to around 30%, top corners of the edges of the butterfly like this. The clipping mask will only color the tone colors that we have selected in the previous tone color. We're going to go on the top left corner, go to the adjustments tools, and use the Gaussian blur. And we're going to hold the screen with our pen, dragging it to the right to around 10% of the Gaussian blur, mixing in some of that yellow tone colors with that orange. And now we can combine those two layers. And now we can pick this light gray tone color, painting on the edges of the butterfly. Now paint the actual butterfly body part at the bottom here. And don't forget to draw the antennas and the legs. And now using the same tone color, we're going to fill in the veins of the butterfly wings. Now we're going to pick a white tone color. And now from that, we're going to create a new layer and use the fine line brush. And we're going to zoom in and keep the size to around 10%, creating some circles on the edges, giving this beautiful, iconic monarch butterfly look. Now we'll be working on the bottom piece of the bear, and we're going to make it as a nice grassy look. Now go to the most bottom layer that we have of the bear, and we're going to create a new layer, but we're going to drag it by holding on to the layer and dragging it to the bottom piece. And now we're going to pick this light green tone color and use the wet on dry brush, keeping the opacity to around 100% and size 100%, and just following along the sketches like this. And I wanted to go for that watercolor stain look, rough look at the edges here. And we're going to create a new layer and add a darker tone color of that green on top of the layer that we just made, just like this. Now using the same tone color, we're going to use the fine line brush this time, and we're going to create some flower veins in the grass parts at the bottom here, and keeping the size to around 13%, and just drawing the lines like this. Putting more pressure at the bottom area, and we flare out to make those grass areas. The fine line brush is great for this because it does taper off, giving a nice flared look. And we're going to create some leaves of the flowers by using the wet on dry brush, keeping the size to around 30% and just drawing in the lines like this. And to make it a bit more realistic with watercolor stain looks, we're going to paint on top of them like this. And do the same thing with the right side of the flowers. And for the flowers, I wanted to make some poppies to give some nice bright red into this painting. So pick this bright red tone color using the wet on dry brush and follow along the sketch like this. And don't overcomplicate this part, just keep it simple and fun. Now we're going to pick the fine line brush and use a black tone color to fill in the center of the flower, just like this. Now I want to create some shadows underneath the bear, so I'm going to create a new layer and use this dark blue tone color, using the wet on dry brush, keeping the opacity to around 30% and size to around 30%. And just like this, we're just going to fill in the bottom piece, the area where the bear is sitting on the grass. And since we added the dark shadows at the bottom, we're going to create some light reflections of the nose and the eye. So go to the topmost layer that we have and create a new layer from there. And we're going to use a white tone color, keeping the size to around 10% and fill in the nose like this, with a little bit of the light reflection in the eyes as well. And from here, we're going to create a new layer and we're going to pick this black tone color and pick the marker brush from our line and wash brush set. And keeping the size to around 15%. And I wanted to create a line and wash style with slight visible lines on the outside of the edges. Kind of like what we did with the fur. In this type of style, we don't even need to connect the lines. We can make it more fun, flaring it out. Slight zigzags, wiggles, keeping it simple and a bit unpredictable. Just like this, across the back, flaring it out, disconnecting some of the lines, wiggles around, and continuing with the flares. Give a nice fluffy look of the bear. You can try without having this line and wash style, but I prefer to have it to keep things a bit more interesting. This type of style combines precise ink lines with fluid watercolor washes, creating a perfect balance of structure while being a bit more expressive. It's quick, versatile, and works well with storytelling, making it ideal for sketching, illustrations like this, and adding more depth and minimal work. And like what we did for the inside back parts of the bear, we're going to create some lines just like this. By doing little, we're doing a lot by adding boldness to the tone colors of the inside. And we're going to do the same thing, drawing in the lines of the flowers like this. Flowers have naturally flowing forms, so using ink like this will help anchor their shapes while allowing the watercolor to bring itself to the life. Now to finish it off, I'm going to add some splashes of the watercolor stains across the painting. So we're going to create a new layer on top of the layers that we have using the Epic Splash brush. So starting from the top, near the butterfly, I'm going to use the bright orange tone color. When using the Epic Splash, I want to match the colors that we used for the bear and the grass, keeping the size to around 15%, and we're going to go across the canvas like this. So near the bear, we're going to keep the size to around 25% and flaring it out outside the painting of the white canvas. And some of the red tone colors of the flowers and some of that green tone colors of the grass. And there we have it, a beautiful moment, butterflies flying over a bear. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you want to continue painting with me, click on the next video and I'll see you there.